I open the extraordinary council meeting on the 23rd of October 2023 at 7:10 p.m. Good evening, councillors and members of the public. I would now like to call on Councillor Pandolfini to read the acknowledgement of country.
I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Bidjigal and the Gadigal people who occupied the Sydney coast, being the traditional owners of the land that we are on. On behalf of Randwick Council, I acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past and present and to Aboriginal people in attendance today.
Thank you. I would now like to call on Councillor D'Souza to read the prayer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Almighty God, we humbly beseech you to bestow your blessings upon this council and to direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the city of Randwick and Australia.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Are there any apologies or granting of leave of absences? I've received an...
Sorry, I have an apology from Councillor Said, who is overseas.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Can I have... Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Move Councillor D'Souza, seconded Councillor Hamilton. All those in favour, say aye. All those against, I declare that carried. I've received a request from Councillor Chappell and Councillor Burst to attend tonight's meeting by audio-visual link. Can I please have someone move a motion as follows? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hay, thank you. That the request by Councillor D'Souza to attend by Councillor Chappell to attend the extraordinary council meeting of the 23rd of October 2023 by audio-visual link be approved. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Please let it be noted that Councillor Chappell and Councillor Burst are unable to attend in person. Are there any declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests? Councillors, are there any declarations? There are none. Thank you. We will now move to the address of council by members of the public. I will read the privacy warning. In respect to Privacy and Personal Information Protection Act, members of the public are advised that the proceedings of this meeting will be recorded for the purposes of clause 5.20 to 5.23 of Council's Code of Meeting Practice. Audio-visual recording of meetings is prohibited without permission. A person may be expelled from a meeting for using or having used an audio-visual video recorder without the expressed authority of council. All members of the public addressing tonight's meeting have a maximum of 4 minutes in which to put their case forward with no extensions available. Presenters will be stopped when the 4 minutes has expired. Councillors may ask questions of presenters at the end of each public submission. Our first speaker on item on the first item is Ms. Michelle Burcon. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have to get my glasses on so I can actually see my speech. Thank you. I don't have a contingent with me today because they're at home trying desperately to stay in touch with loved ones who are currently suffering under a brutal attack by Israel. They are in Gaza, where they have very little electricity. It's severely rationed, where they don't even have access to fresh water. They do not have nice photographs printed out of those of their family members captive and held captive in Israeli jails from children upward, because they're usually taken away in the middle of the night.
Members of the public, please allow the speaker to continue. Thank you.
Furthermore, they cannot hope for the return of their loved ones if their state so chooses, because thousands of them are now dead. I'd also like everyone to note that point 4.7 of Council's flying of flags policy states that the Council may fly the national flags of other countries as a show of support in times of crisis. Now, somebody in the audience, I don't know what you call them, audience or attendees, said, oh, but Palestine's not a country. So this is a technicality. However, Palestine is accorded observer status at the United Nations. Furthermore, the flags of our Indigenous people, whether the Aboriginal flag or the Torres Strait Islander flag, neither could be technically termed the national flags of a country. We fly them in honour of the fact that these are the stolen lands upon which we stand and work and live and pray. And we should be flying the Palestinian flag because we have so many members of that community in our Australian and especially in our Sydney community. Irrespective of whether they are in Randwick particularly or whether they are in Sydney generally, we should be supporting human rights in this council.
Members of the public, I'd kindly request to allow the speaker to continue. Thank you.
In fact, for Palestinians, this time of crisis has existed since 1948. Over 400 villages were razed to the grounds, their ruins hidden under national parks to obliterate the evidence and prevent the return of refugees guaranteed under international law. Over 750,000 people were forced to flee. Those who remained inside Israel lived under military occupation for almost 20 years. No sooner were they included in the civilian law that applied to everybody else than Israel captured the Golan, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. For 55 years, Palestinians in the West Bank have lived under military occupation. I'd call that a crisis. They cannot vote for the parliament of the country that controls their lives. Their land has been steadily swallowed by illegal settlements. They are subjected to a relentless barrage of human rights violations, including random checkpoints, detention without trial or charge, torture, imprisonment of their children, house demolitions, water apartheid, uprooting of olive trees.
Members of the public, I did not
get 4 minutes to speak.
Allow the speaker. Excuse me, members of the public and councillors. There's been a call for an extension, seconded by Councillor Nielsen. Thank you. Councillors, can we please, all those in support of the extension, please raise your hand. All those in favour say aye, or against. I declare that carried. Thank you.
Thank you so much, councillors. In a country that espouses equality and pluralism, all communities have the right to have their identity recognised and respected. In crisis, especially in this terrible crisis, they deserve to see that we empathise with their suffering. Flying the Palestinian flag on one day of the year is the least we can do. Councillor Rosenfeld is correct that support for Palestine is growing. Australians who value human rights are increasingly rejecting the oppression of Palestinian people. As a Jewish Australian, I am one of those people.
Please, members of the public, I would ask the speaker to conclude their remarks.
Personally,
please allow the speaker to be heard in silence.
I do not object to Councillor Rosenfeld's motion that Council hold a minute's silence for Israel, as long as we expand this silence to acknowledge the victims in Palestine. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'd like to note members of the gallery can be removed if you do not treat this chamber with full respect and the speakers here. Thank you. Councillors, were there any questions for the speaker? No. We'll now move on to the second speaker, Max. Dr. Max, thank you.
I love this area and I love this community, and I have never spoken at a council meeting before. Never have I had the need. Randwick City Council does a great job, thank you all. I especially love the council nursery and our parks and open spaces. We all believe in the same thing: all people matter. I'm going to put on a yarmulke right now because so many residents of Randwick are afraid to put this on right now. As a Randwick ratepayer and a long-time surf lifesaver in Randwick, my work as a volunteer is to keep you all safe on our beaches. So I ask for the same thing for our community. Councillors, think about the words that you use today because they matter. Don't inflame this situation in a city where, embarrassingly last week, there were calls to gas the Jews at Sydney Opera House, the iconic Sydney Opera House. It is a national embarrassment to this country. Where Sydney residents handed out lollies to children immediately after the barbaric and heinous terrorist attack on Israeli citizens and Israeli civilians. I'm not sure how many of you know how those Israelis were tortured, but if you're a parent, it would make you cry. And if you are human, it should make you cry. And yet, anti-Semitism is up 400% in the last 2 weeks. Think about that. There is a real risk of violence here in Randwick, our beloved multicultural community. Councillors, your words and actions today matter to Randwick residents' safety. I would like to implore you to consider this over and above any ideological views you may hold. Your fiduciary duty is to your constituency in your Randwick backyard. The flag. We all want the Palestinians to be safe, to be free, for their children to live with dreams and aspirations. Israeli neighbours more than anyone want this to happen. But our terror and pain has one culprit: Hamas. Hamas does not care about a two-state solution. They do not care about Palestinian suffering. They have one mission: to create an Islamic caliphate and erase all the Jews off of this earth. Take their words for it. The Hamas Charter calls for the murder of Jews everywhere. On October 7, they carried ISIS flags. We feel for the Palestinians. We want them to be free from Hamas's reign of terror. Of course, Israel withdrew from this territory of Gaza in 2005. Unfortunately, there is an absence of moral clarity and a reduction to simplistic identity politics. That's why at this time, flying a Palestinian flag in isolation is dangerous. It could easily be misconstrued as supporting a violent struggle against Israel and the Jewish community. In the absence of an Israeli flag next to it, you might as well fly a Hamas flag, legitimising the events of October 7. If you truly care about peace, you cannot fly a Palestinian flag on its own. The events of October 7 were the largest terrorist attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Think about that. Barbaric acts such as killing babies and children in front of their parents, beheadings, burning alive, rape and torture unfolded. None of these acts can ever be considered legitimate resistance. Ever. Not here, not anywhere on this planet. Councillors, your words and actions matter to the residents of Randwick and our safety. Our Jewish schools and places of worship are protected with armed guards and police. Our children are noticing it and it's not okay, though I commend New South Wales Police for their outstanding work. We anxiously drop off our children each day, wondering if today is the day that they will come for our children. Your words matter to our safety. When the BBC last week said that Israel bombed a hospital and killed 500 people, when in fact Palestinian terrorists perhaps accidentally did so, only 26 people were killed, it matters because riots erupted all over the Middle East and all over Europe. This could happen here in Randwick. Your words matter and your actions matter today for our safety. As a surf lifesaver, I can't choose who I protect. I don't discriminate in terms of who I will be rescuing.
Extension for 1 minute. Seconded. All those in favour of an extension or against, I declare that carried.
Well, if I'm going to do that, then I'm not going to rush through what I just said. But think about the actions of the BBC. Think about what they did. They knew that they would incite violence. They knew that that was the impact of accusing Israel of doing what they did, right? Yet for comparison, Hamas bombed an Israeli hospital and no one protested. As a surf lifesaver, I can't choose who to rescue in the ocean. I save everyone without discrimination. And I don't want our beloved city of Randwick to discriminate against some of our community and potentially endanger them. You have a choice tonight. Your words and your actions matter to our residents. Don't inflame the situation unnecessarily. Do not let us down. Do not let our children down. Do not let the wider community down. Do not let down the City of Sydney, the state of New South Wales, and our country because the world's watching. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If there are no questions of the Speaker, we'll move on to the item. NM 6923, Notice of Motion from Councillor Rosenfeld, Flying of Flags Policy.
Okay, I'm just going to be moving it in an amended fashion, and I've already sent it to
Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCafferty to second.
So I'm moving it in an amended fashion, and I've sent it to Mr. Kelly. So basically what I've put in is I've put in some points that basically come from a notice of motion that Councillor Hamilton was putting up from tomorrow night, and putting those points in this. So D basically says condemns a horrific and coordinated attack by Hamas on Israel. And you can see that E denounces the killing of civilians and firing of rockets into cities and taking of hostages. F extends its sympathy to the loved ones of those who have died. G calls for an end to attacks and immediate release of all hostages. And then basically, if you keep going down, David, please. I changed the hold a minute silence for Israel to basically hold a minute silence to all those affected. So as far as the motion's concerned, I voted against the amendment moved in the June Ordinary Council meeting to fly the flag of Palestine on November 29th. My fellow Liberal councillors did likewise. I acknowledge that it was supported by majority of councillors. Given the recent barbaric terrorist attacks by Hamas on October 7th, involving the slaughter of babies, music festival goers, the elderly, etc., I believe it would be very wrong of Randwick City Council to go ahead with the flying of the Palestinian flag on November 29th. Innocent Israeli citizens were rounded up by Hamas terrorists and shot in cold blood. Hamas wiped out entire families. More Jews died on October 7th than in any other day since the Holocaust. Indeed, watching the news seemed to remind me of the footage from World War II when SS troops gathered all the Jews from Ukrainian villages and shot them en masse into pits. These attacks by Hamas killed 1,400 Israelis as well as 200 taken hostage. The subsequent daily threats to many Israeli lives by rocket fire has impacted the Jewish community in Australia very hard. There are many Jewish people here that have relatives in Israel who are going through daily anguish. Our LGA has a large Jewish presence, including 2 synagogues, a high school, 2 primary schools and an aged care provider. The Jewish community in Randwick feels very uncomfortable about us raising the Palestinian flag on November 29th. To my horror, only 2 days after these heinous terrorist acts, pro-Palestinian protesters shouted and held up signs saying "Gas to Jews" and "Death to the Jews" in the middle of our city. They did this while holding up many Palestinian flags. As I've told many of you councillors before, I'm the grandson of Holocaust survivors, and my great-grandparents, as well as some great-uncles, were gassed in the Holocaust. To see people chanting these things, "Gas to Jews," in the city I live, in the country my grandparents moved to escape this terrible ordeal they had to go through, was very disturbing. As I grew up with stories from those grandparents about all the horrors they went through, including losing their parents to the gas chambers when they were only in their 20s. I also asked for a minute's silence to remember all those Israelis who lost their lives during this horrific attack, as well as all the other innocent victims of this conflict, including Palestinian ones, and may they all rest in peace.
Councillor McCafferty.
What has been uncovered in Australia's reaction to the Israeli-Hamas conflict is our soft underbelly of weakness and moral equivalence. The councillors of Randwick City are no exception. Hamas didn't accidentally parachute hundreds of murderous maniacs into Israel. They didn't accidentally slaughter 1,400 civilians. Neither did they, in passing, rip children from their mothers, take civilians hostage, murder elderly Holocaust victims in their homes, and burn people alive in their own homes. Hamas meticulously planned actual violence, the kind of violence that sees babies decapitated, that sees the murder of pregnant women, the kidnapping of children, and terrorists live stream the execution of a grandmother on her own Facebook page. They weren't hunting Israelis, much less soldiers. They were hunting for Jews. The Hamas apologists in our midst are every bit as morally culpable as the savages who commissioned, planned, and carried out those actions. Their unequivocal condemnation is, in fact, the least complicated thing around. We have witnessed the embodiment of evil. But still, a disturbing number of people have spoken of these things as if they were some kind of accident, some kind of event you can just brush aside, like dropping the F-bomb after stubbing your toe. The same people who regularly say language is violence refuse to condemn actual violence. The same people who defend the right to protest, despite the fact that such protests have simultaneously mobilised and protected the Jew haters to spew their filth on our usually peaceful streets. In the face of overwhelming evidence, many refused to believe that Hamas had beheaded Jewish babies. In the face of absolutely no evidence, these same people were quite happy to say that Israel had fired a rocket at a hospital in Gaza and killed 500 people. When the truth emerged that it was a terrible, tragic own goal, there was no commensurate condemnation for the culprits. Since it was founded in 1987, the goal of Hamas has never been to protect civilians. It has always used them as shields, compounding its crimes against humanity. Now, as Gaza groans in seas of blood, the Palestinians losing their lives are the victims of Hamas every bit as surely as their Israeli counterparts. It's an absolute truth to say that there have been civilian casualties in the West Bank through the decades of conflict. It is absolutely true to say that there are things that have gone terribly wrong during Israel Defense Forces incursions, but these were not deliberate, and those responsible were held to account. To say that these are one and the same is implausible. It's not just false equivalence, it's a fundamental moral failure. What makes a person so blinded by ideology that all reason goes out the door, unable to accept the facts as truth? As the Teal MP for Wentworth, Allegra Spender, said last week, I support the legitimate aspirations of Palestinians for statehood, but Hamas is committed to the destruction of Israel, so can never be a partner for peace. There it is, nuance. Recognition that there can be no peace when one side's primary purpose is annihilating the other. I can distinguish between Hamas and the subjugated people of the disputed territories, and I can tell the difference between good and evil. I urge you to support the motion.
Councillor Olive.
Yes, I'd like to call for an amendment to the motion. Mr. Kelly, could you put, I have points A, B and C, and I would like to replace those A, B and C in the existing motion, and I would like to can you go up a little bit? Came late. I'd like to I would like to keep points D, E, F and G. And I would like to replace point H with call for an immediate ceasefire. And I would like to remove...
Councillors will be heard in silence.
I would like to remove point I.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pandolfini.
And could I have a look at what J was on that? I wasn't quite... I mean, I think that that will be covered by one of the points up higher, but yes, that I leave point J is fine. It will become now point I guess. We're deleting I. Okay, well, we're good to go? Okay.
I'll first ask, does the mover accept the amendment?
No.
We'll now move on to the amendment.
I'm proposing we have a minute's silence for all the victims of the conflict in Palestine and Israel, because misery has been visited on all sides. In Israel on October 7, the Hamas military savagely killed at least 1,400 people and injured 3,800.
Excuse me, I would ask respectfully that the members of the gallery allow the councillor to be heard.
The location of these atrocities...
Otherwise, we will have to ask the speakers to leave, please. Thank you.
The location of these atrocities included a music festival. More than 200, mainly Israelis, were taken hostage. Since October 7, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have killed and injured many more Palestinians, including more than 1,000 children, and demolished buildings in mass bombing raids on an area 1/34 the size of Sydney, with a population of 2.3 million. The Israeli military have taken siege to Gaza and cut off supplies of food, water, fuel and medicine in an act of collective punishment. There are reports of hunger, dehydration, the real risk of cholera and a humanitarian crisis. More than 1 million Palestinians are being forcibly displaced from their homes in northern Gaza and told to go to southern Gaza. Since October 7, the number of Palestinians killed and injured in the occupied West Bank steadily grows. We need an immediate ceasefire, otherwise there will be more victims to mourn. For these reasons, we should have a minute's silence for the victims of this conflict. I also hope Council will re-endorse Resolution CC 1123 from June and fly the Palestinian flag in November. First, it should be noted that Councillor Rosenfeld moved a motion to fly the Israeli flag in the February meeting, and Council did this in April of this year. Council then resolved to fly the Palestinian flag as a symbolic support for the two-state solution. For without a free and unoccupied homeland for Palestinians, as Federal Labor Minister Ed Husick said recently, more generations will be scarred by conflict. This is the purpose of flying the Palestinian flag in November. Please support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Olive. Councillor Pandolfini as the seconder of the amendment.
I'd first like to acknowledge the difficult time in Australia for so many people at the moment, especially First Nations people. I would like to acknowledge the extraordinarily heartening result in this LGA, one of the only LGAs in the east of this country, to vote yes. Yes to a voice and yes to truth.
We're doing this tomorrow night.
I will hear the point of order.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Councillor Pandolfini is not speaking to the motion in front of us.
Councillor Pandolfini, please continue and please address the motion. Thank you.
I would like to echo today the sentiments of all Green leaders over the past couple of weeks, that no civilian should be the target of war, that the terrorist attack by Hamas on the 7th of October on Israeli civilians was a devastating and horrific war crime that led to a catastrophic loss of life in tragic circumstances, as is the taking of hostages that is causing ongoing suffering. Just as the attack on Palestinian civilians by the Israeli military through ongoing and consistent attack to date has resulted in the loss of nearly 5,000 lives and tens of thousands of horrific injuries, mainly affecting women
Excuse me, Madam
and
Mayor.
children.
I can't hear the feed from here because of the audience.
We have excuse me. I'm addressing the members in the public gallery. We have two councillors joining us via video link. They cannot hear while you are speaking. This will be a final request for silence and for respectful courtesy to the councillors who are here tonight, who have come here to hear an extraordinary meeting called by one of our councillor colleagues. That is why we're here tonight. We need to listen to everyone in the debate. I would finally request for all councillors to be heard in silence.
Madam Mayor, Bill Burst, I can hear very clearly.
I would also like to reiterate that the anti-Semitism and Islamophobia that has ensued since October the 7th is disgusting, wrong, and has no place in our communities ever. We are here today because the Liberal councillors submitted an emergency motion to rescind the flying of the Palestinian flag and have a minute's silence for the Israeli victims of the horrific atrocity that Hamas committed on October the 7th. I would like to remind you that it is the majority of Labor and Liberal councillors and the independent councillor in this chamber who voted to wave flags around this council building in 2023. Not only was the Greek flag raised, but so too was the Israeli flag motion approved at this council before the state election earlier this year. This was at a time where hundreds and thousands of residents in Israel were protesting their government's push for wide-ranging judicial overhaul. We had a full room of distraught residents when this motion was waved through. The reason the Palestinian flag was suggested to be raised, supported by Labor and their constituents, was to ensure that both sides were represented. In this LGA, we have an extremely diverse mix of people from all different cultures, backgrounds, and religions. We voted against raising both of these flags at local council level. The second point I'd like to make on this motion is that it requests a minute's silence for the lives lost in Israel and the people affected. This does not consider the fact that Palestinian lives have been lost. In fact, this completely erases the fact that thousands of Palestinians have been killed and are being killed. This is a dehumanisation of innocent Palestinian civilians. On day 15, 4,651 Palestinians have been killed Israel has dropped more bombs on an area smaller than here to Bondi in 2 weeks that were dropped on Afghanistan by the US in a whole year. 40% of those lives lost are children. 1,023 are women and 187 are elderly. 14,245 Palestinians have been injured. There is no running water in Gaza, no food and no electricity. The aid that is now being allowed into the area is being described by the UN as a trickle. The ongoing bombing of Gaza and the killing of forced displacement of its residents has been condemned by Amnesty International, the United Nations, the World Health Organization and Action Aid. These, among many other global bodies, have indicated that the collective punishment of Gazan civilians, which includes the killing of aid workers, journalists and medics, as well as the destruction of infrastructure and life-sustaining resources, cutting off food, water, electricity and medicine, amounts to a war crime. To erase that this is occurring without calling it for what it is makes us entirely complicit. Thank you.
Councillor Hay.
I'd like to speak against the amendment. Councillors, Hamas runs Palestine as a terrorist state. Hamas has recently engaged in the worst acts of terrorism against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Whatever the original intention, if we raise the Palestinian flag in November, it will be interpreted as an endorsement of Hamas and their terrorism. Randwick Council must denounce terrorism, and Australia must stand firmly with our ally Israel in their time of crisis. For those reasons, I urge everyone to vote down this amendment and not fly the Palestinian flag. Thank you.
Councillor De Souza.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, it's 1 minute. There are two phrases you will always hear at Jewish celebrations. Mazel Tov, which means congratulations, good luck, and the other is L'chaim. L'chaim, to life, because Jewish people, we value life. We know that this is sacred because it's given to us by God, the same God that gave the Holy Land to the Jewish people. This is why the massacre of Jews and the taking of over 1,400 lives, Jewish lives, is so tragic and must be avenged. My father would say to me, be proud of who you are and be strong of your identity. Just believe in yourself and believe in what's right and understand we're doing something in this generation for the next. As a strong Zionist, I am very proud of the state of Israel and am proud to identify myself with the Jewish people. The next actions of the IDF is something they must do for the safety of Israel and for the next generation. On the 7th of October, a date linked with infamy, Hamas, a terrorist group, unleashed a merciless and murderous attack on the state of Israel. For 24 hours, we had a glimpse of hell. We saw the worst of humanity with all its barbarity. Innocent women, children, and unarmed civilians were gunned down, raped, butchered, only because they were Jewish. The Hamas terrorists attempted to cause fear and chaos. Fear can cause people to forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. Israel and its people choose to face everything and rise. In this battle between good and evil, Israel has chosen to be the defenders of good and the protectors of civilization as we know it. In Dante's Inferno, the sign above the gates of hell reads, Lasciate ogni speranze voi entrate, which means abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Hamas on October 7th may have opened the gates of hell, but the Jewish people will never abandon hope. With our help and the Israeli Defense Force, the Jewish people will never abandon hope because it is a land God gave to the children of Abraham and his descendants. This brave and golden land is Jewish land. It is their home. If they have to fight, they will fight to make this land their home. Today we debate whether we should fly the Palestinian flag on our council chambers. To many Jews, the recent events in Israel are raw and real, and the actions of Hamas cannot be endorsed or condoned. Their attack on Israel on the 7th of October was not just an attack on the Jewish state, but it was an attack on civilization. They broke all the rules of a civilized society. Their barbarism and cruelty cannot be endorsed and mustn't go unpunished. The hosting of a Palestinian flag on the Randwick Town Hall or the council chamber after this barbaric and murderous actions of Hamas will be sending the wrong message to our community and will not help strengthen that sense of community we are so proud of in Randwick City. We are facing an inflection point in history. A local Jewish man expressed the community sentiment to me today. At this time now, raising the Palestinian flag would only demonstrate bias to one side of the argument and inflame matters in our local community. Doing nothing and not raising any flag is a better option. And what is planned, and one that could add additional fear and concern in our local community, especially the lives of our children. My friends, the flying of the Palestinian flag after the brutal and barbaric attack now associated with Hamas would be endorsing terrorism, hatred, and division in our civilized society, and therefore I cannot support it.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I commend Councillor D'Souza, Councillor McCafferty, Councillor Rosenfeld and Councillor Hay for their words. They don't need to be spoken again, but I do want to correct some mistruths that I've heard in this room at this time. The first thing is that this flying of the Palestinian flag or not flying of the Palestinian flag will scar children. I believe that flying the Palestinian flag, given what has just happened, not months ago, not years ago, which has just happened, will scar people. We need to stop it. We need to stop propagating the Hamas terrorism. The other thing that we heard was that this was an urgent motion and we had to deal with it. Councillor Rosenfeld put forward this motion on the morning of the Bali bombing memorial. He was so moved that he knew this motion needed to come forward, and it was put forward under urgency according to the Code of Meeting Practice. So he followed all the rules, and he wanted to make sure that what he was doing was addressing this horrific act immediately. We've only now, just now, been able to come to you, the Randwick residents, to debate this, to move this and ensure that the Palestinian flag is not raised. What Councillor Rosenfeld also did was he pulled forward some points that I put on the business paper for tomorrow night. And he did that because I didn't know when we were going to have this extraordinary meeting. I didn't know when it was going to happen. So I put up another motion so that we could double down. We could really show that the Liberals of Randwick are 100% behind you. The other thing I wanted to make a comment on what I'd heard is that we heard the timing of events and which political parties voted for what. The reality is we all are here because of you. We are supporting Randwick residents, so it shouldn't be about politics, and that's what gets us all into the trouble, isn't it? So put all politics aside, do the right thing, and do not fly the Palestinian flag.
I have Councillor Parker and then Councillor Chappell.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I would like to begin by stating that I do not support the amendment because it would facilitate the flying of the flag, the Palestinian flag, in November of this year. And the reason why I do not believe it to be appropriate is it would be inhuman of me to say that I have not been moved and personally very quite shaken by the events which we have witnessed abroad of absolute barbarity, of absolute terror, of absolute an absolute appalling nature. But more so than that, what has also shocked me has been the reaction to what has been an utterly shocking series of events abroad, but has been the reaction at home. And to see and to hear from the speakers who have spoken about the rise of anti-Semitism across our community has, I have to say, in 2023, really quite shaken me to my core. I have had the privilege to stand alongside the local Jewish community at Dover Heights and more recently at Maroubra Synagogue, and to say that the hurt, that the trauma, that the raw emotion and the shock of what has been happening in Israel and Palestine cuts to the core, I think, would be to understate the extent of that feeling. I believe that to continue to fly the flag would not only be inflammatory, but would send quite clearly the wrong message to the entire community. It would raise the temperature when it is incumbent on all of us to lower that temperature. One of the speakers spoke earlier about the fact that for the first time that they feel unsafe in their community. I have had Jewish friends who have said to me for the first time in their lives that they feel unsafe in their community. And as elected representatives, I think that it is incumbent on all of us to make sure that our community is safe, but more importantly, feels safe. As it relates to the events overseas, I would like to say this without equivocation. Hamas must be condemned and called out for what it is. It is a violent and atrocious terror organisation that, as those behind us have illustrated, have kidnapped and held hostage Israeli and Jewish citizens, as well as those from abroad. But they have also held hostage the Palestinian people. They have set back the cause of the two-state solution by many, many decades in those actions, and more importantly, the calls for peace. It must be called out for what it is. I am pleased that all motions are calling and recognise that Hamas is nothing more than an atrocious terror organisation and should be called out as such. But I cannot support this amendment because it would facilitate the flying of the Palestinian flag at a time when we should be making sure that our entire community feels safe and feels understood and feels seen. And to do that at this time would inflame the situation beyond no end. As I conclude my remarks, what I would like to say is a thank you to the Jewish community who, for many, many years across my elected life, have opened their arms and their door to me as someone who is not Jewish, and welcome that warmly. And as an elected representative, I can't look away and say, well, at a time when quite clearly they have said that we require those in the community to stand up and to recognise what we need in order to be safe. And for that, I cannot turn away and say that we will raise the flag at this time, knowing in good faith what it would do and what it would be interpreted as across our community, regardless of the individual intentions of those who may seek to fly it, but the implications of those who would see that as an action across our community. For that, I cannot support the amendment, and I commend the motion as moved by Councillor Rosenfeld.
Councillor Chappell.
Thank you, Mayor Veitch. Can you hear me in the room? I've lost audio.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to start by saying that the attack on civilians by Hamas was horrific, and I join with my Greens colleagues in condemning it. So too is the death of so many Palestinian civilians from Israeli bombs that fall from the sky on their homes. And empathy and human rights can't stop at a border. And that's why I support this amendment. I think we as councillors have a responsibility to take a tempered and responsible view and to lead with our values. My values are recognising our common humanity and peace. We have a responsibility to live up to our sense of community and prioritise community safety. We have a Jewish population, many of whom are feeling vulnerable today, and we hear that. We also have Muslim people in our area who are also feeling vulnerable. We've heard described tonight a 4 times increase in attacks on Jewish people. The same is being reported by the Australian Islamophobia Register. We also in Sydney have 30,000 people from diverse backgrounds who marched to raise awareness of war crimes in Palestine. Jews against the occupation were there in solidarity. There are peace marches in Israel right now, even though they face repression from a violent right-wing government. We've had representations from council from progressive members of the Jewish community who, even in the middle of their own pain and fear, want us to remember others. We've heard from local Palestinian people about the fear for their families and their stories of loss and love. Nelson Mandela said, "There's no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way it treats its children." And that applies to the children of Israel who were murdered brutally. Of course it does. But it also applies to the Palestinian children in Gaza who have had apartment blocks dropped on them, who have had water and food and fuel cut. We've seen doctors in the hospital there pleading for the resupply of fuel so that 130 premature babies on ventilators do not die. The UN, Amnesty, Médecins Sans Frontières and the WHO are all calling for a ceasefire and prioritising humanitarian access, and we join this call. We need to put our community first, stand up against hatred. That's what this amendment seeks to do. I really urge you to support it.
Can I ask for the amendment to be put, please?
Is there a seconder? Oh, I have a question from Councillor Olive.
To the relevant officer, that this was not a meeting of urgency, this was an extraordinary meeting.
Point of order.
Councillor Olive, you will need to sit while we hear Councillor Hamilton's point of order.
Putting a point of order across to clarify if Councillor Olive is closing the debate on the amendment, which you can't do because you can't close a debate on an amendment, and we already voted to put, and I seconded the put to vote.
I believe Councillor Olive is asking a question. Is that correct? Thank you. Councillor Olive.
To the relevant officer, this was never an urgency meeting, this was an extraordinary meeting, and with extraordinary meetings, the Mayor has the choice to call this meeting anywhere within 2 weeks of the extraordinary meeting being notified. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it's an extraordinary council meeting, and under the Code of Meeting Practice, there's 14 days for the Mayor to call the meeting.
Thank you.
I've received a request to put the motion. Is there a seconder? Yes. Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All those in favour of putting the motion, aye. All those against, I declare that carried. We will now move the motion, the amendment. Call for a division from Councillor Hay, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All those for the amendment, please raise your hands. Councillor Pandolfini, Councillor Olive, Councillor Chappell and the Mayor. All those against the amendment, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Hay, Councillor Luxford, Councillor Parker, Councillor Rosenfeld, Councillor McCafferty, Councillor Wilson and Councillor D'Souza. And Councillor Burst. I will ask members of the gallery to allow councillors to conduct this meeting in an orderly fashion.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Councillor Nelson wasn't recorded for or against? She abstained. Does that mean it's against? Yeah.
Through to the General Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Councillor Nielsen did not vote. She abstained, however, it was recorded as against. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was an opportunity you had at your disposal, which you should have done.
We will now move back to the motion. Are there any further speakers on the motion?
Yeah, just in closing, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, there was another speaker.
Councillor.
Sorry.
I've had a call from Councillor Chappell.
Sorry, I'd like to speak to the motion.
Councillor Chappell would like to speak to the motion. I then will take a question from Councillor Olive. Thank you.
I'd just like to say I have deep concerns about this motion and the one-sidedness of what is being put forward here. I think it's deeply disappointing that we weren't able to come to a position we could all support, where we recognise the humanity of everybody involved, where we call for an end to all war crimes, where we call for a ceasefire and peace. And I cannot vote for this.
Councillor Olive.
I can't vote for this particular motion, particularly in a sort of where it says Israel's right to defend, because it has no sense of proportionality. How far?
This is the final request, with full respect for members of the public gallery, to allow this meeting to be conducted in an orderly fashion. For those who feel very emotional, you have the option of leaving the room and listening in to the meeting via audio link. I will ask anyone who is not able to listen to the rest of this meeting in silence, with respect for the process of this democratic institution of local government, to avail yourself of the opportunity to listen to the meeting via audio link. Would anyone like to take that opportunity right now? Thank you. Councillor Olive.
I feel that this motion is just so open-ended that it would justify anything, and I can't be a part of justifying any particular attacks on anything goes when it comes to the Israeli military defence forces attacks on Gaza. There have to be limits, and that's why we called for a ceasefire before, and that's why I can't vote for this particular motion. I call for the motion to be put.
I'll give Councillor Rosenfeld the opportunity to close the meeting.
Okay, I'm happy for it to be put. Okay, just in closing, just want to reiterate what I said earlier. Hamas atrocities really deeply affected the Jewish community. I'm one of those members of the Jewish community in this LGA. Again, 1,400 of my fellow Jewish persons were slaughtered on October 7th, 200 taken hostage. I reiterate that we are going to hold a minute's silence if this is indeed successful for all those affected. I acknowledge innocent Palestinians that have been impacted as well, as Councillor McCafferty said, some of that through misfired rockets from Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, but they are innocent victims. Also, on the record, I need to correct something that Councillor Panalfini mentioned earlier regarding the Israeli flag, that I never raised that for anything to do with the protests in Israel regarding the Supreme Court, because I himself was not happy with the Prime Minister Netanyahu's policy regarding the Supreme Court. If you can go back to the recording, Councillor Panalfini, I purely said to celebrate the 75th year of independence of Israel as a state, nothing to do with that. In fact, we had a private conversation and you asked me what my thoughts were, and I said I was against Prime Minister Netanyahu's policy regarding the Supreme Court, and still am against it. Also, I think that's about it. I think we can go to the vote.
call for a division.
There's been a request for a division. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. I have Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Hay, Councillor Parker, Councillor Rosenfeld, Councillor McCafferty, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Burst and Councillor D'Souza. All those against the motion. Councillor Pandolfini, Councillor Olive, Councillor Chappell and the Mayor. There have been 2 abstentions which will be recorded against, Councillor Nielsen and Councillor Luxford. I've received a request for urgent business. I declare the motion carried. Councillors, I have received a request for urgent business. I will now hear, Councillor Chappell, could you please explain to the chamber why you consider this business to be urgent?
Point of order, Madam Mayor. When will we conduct the minute silence?
After we hear the urgent business. Councillor Chappell, can you please explain your urgent business? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is it possible to bring it up onto the screen, just so that everybody in the room is aware? So I understand I have to argue for why this is urgent, and I think this motion is urgent just in the context of the discussion we've just had, just to put fully on the record that we stand against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia wherever they occur, and specify that we extend our sympathies to those killed in Israel and in Gaza, and specifically to families in our area who have lost loved ones. I think this is urgent because obviously this is going on right now, and we've just made the other resolution about it, so this is relevant now.
Councillor Nielsen seconding. I hear a point of order from Councillor Hamilton.
Point 3 is exactly what we just voted on, and I just asked you before hearing the urgent business when we were going to hold that minute silence. And
can I speak to that, Councillor Hamilton?
No. I'm talking to the Mayor.
I don't consider, there was no move for the minute silence straight after the meeting. We're hearing the urgent business.
I'm very happy to clarify and remove point 3. This motion was drafted before we saw the final version of your amended motion that was circulated. So I'm very happy to remove that point and just ask for urgency on points 1 and 2, which I think are very modest requests where we're just standing with our community on these really important issues.
Councillor Nielsen, are you happy to accept that change? Are there any further speakers? We will now move as to whether this is urgent or not. Councillor Hay.
If I could briefly ask, why is this considered urgent in that, why is this so important that it couldn't wait till the next meeting?
Councillor Chappell.
Was that through to me? Thank you, Councillor Hay, for the question. I appreciate it. I believe the same arguments for urgency apply here as applied to Councillor Rosenfeld's motion, that this is a matter that is ongoing at the moment. There are 77 Australians currently trapped in Gaza. There are families in our community who have relatives who are hostages in Israel. I'd just like us to recognise that this is happening right now and extend our support to those people and stand against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and be really explicit about that, because as we've heard from speakers today, this is happening right now, and it's urgent that we take a stand against it.
Question through to
you from Councillor Hamilton.
Madam Mayor. In the debate on the previous motion, Councillor Olive stood and he made a statement that the urgent motion calling for an extraordinary meeting tonight was submitted but not considered urgent. So if that motion that Councillor Rosenfeld submitted over a week and a half ago was not considered urgent, then this cannot be considered urgent. We have a council meeting tomorrow. And the reason he put that up was because there was such a time had moved past the 7th of October, and we knew that we were not meeting until now. So he was trying to do it as early as possible, given what had just happened. And you left it until now. So you considered it not urgent. You need to rule that this is not urgent as well.
Can I ask the question of the General Manager, please?
Councillors, we have received a request for urgent business. As per the Code of Meeting Practice, we have heard why the mover believes it to be urgent business, and we will now vote.
Can I just seek
on
clarification,
whether
please?
this motion is urgent.
From the General Manager?
Councillor Chapel.
Yep. Sorry, can the General Manager just clarify about that process there? Because I understood that this was the correct way to raise this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it is. It's urgent business under the Code of Meeting Practice for extraordinary council meetings done after the notice of motion that we just dealt with, and this is the correct process to go through.
I will now put the urgent business. All those who consider this business to be urgent, please raise your hand. Councillor Pandolfini, Councillor Nielsen, Councillor Luxford, Councillor Parker, Councillor Olive, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Chapel and the Mayor. All those against, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Hay, Councillor Rosenfeld, Councillor McCafferty, Councillor Burst, Councillor D'Souza. I declare that motion carried. We will now debate the urgent business. Councillor Chapel.
Thank you. I think it has actually already all been said in debate. I think we owe it to our community to reflect on what they're all going through at the moment and to stand in solidarity with them, including against hatred they may be experiencing here. I think this is a pathway to peace and understanding.
Thank you, Councillor Chapel. Councillor Nielsen is the seconder. Do you wish to speak?
Just to say I concur with the position put forward by Councillor Chapel, and I think Councillor Wilson wants to say something too.
Councillor Wilson.
I'd like to put the motion.
I received a call to put the motion, seconded by Councillor Rosenfeld. I move that the motion be put. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? I declare that carried. We are now going to put the motion. We are now going to put the urgent business as moved by Councillor Chapel, seconded by Councillor Nielsen. We are now voting on the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Please, actually, there was no call for a division. All those in favour, please. There is a call for a division. Councillor Pandolfini, Councillor Nielsen, Councillor Luxford, Councillor Olive, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Parker, Councillor Chapel and the Mayor.
Point of order. Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
You've now taken the vote and the division was called, but there was no seconder. The division is out of order.
Councillor Pandolfini seconded it.
I didn't hear you call that. I didn't hear that.
I'm happy to second.
Councillors,
You can't second after
I
the
will
vote
request
has
your
started.
indulgence as my first meeting as chair.
There was no seconder for the division. I sit right next to Councillor Pandolfini. She doesn't know the rules on how to actually conduct herself in a meeting, which is to call your name out.
Councillor
Then-
Pandolfini seconded
Point
it.
of order.
Councillor Pandolfini seconded it.
Vote has begun.
We
Time
will-
has lapsed.
We will go straight back to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Councillor Pandolfini, Councillor Nielsen, Councillor Luxford, Councillor Parker, Councillor Olive, Councillor Chapel, Councillor Wilson and the Mayor. All those against? Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Hay, Councillor Rosenfeld, Councillor McCafferty and Councillor D'Souza. I declare the motion carried. We will now hold a minute. Oh, apologies, Councillor Burst. I'm sorry. It's a very tiny screen that you're both on.
I've been forgotten several times now, so...
I apologise, Councillor Burst.
Thank you, Councillor Burst, for calling in on holiday.
We will now all stand for the minute's silence. Thank you. If there is no further business, I will close the meeting at 8:21 p.m. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, members of the gallery, for coming tonight.